Hey, welcome to the latest episode of the Wellbeing Show. Kat is joining me again. She's an assistant professor at Coventry University, and in psychology and looking at child development. And so we're going to have some interesting chats about the brave new world we're in with the social media ban and what that's all about. But look at child development in general as well, and this World Wide Web where we have screens everywhere, and Kat's very much an expert on that, particularly early child development. And we might put the world to rights as well. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. If there's anything that he's put to rights, I'm sure we'll find a way of doing it. Just before we jump into that, just to remind everybody, this is pre-recorded. So when you see it, I will be out socializing. So don't call me when you see it. But do send me a message, 07506 WhatsApp is good. Or drop a comment underneath the video, like it. All of that sort of stuff is really helpful as we try to create informed and informative psychological content on the internet. That's enough from me. How you doing, Kat? You'll see you've got your fans blowing.
Yeah, I kept trying to angle it so that I wasn't just in a very like movie scene, when it's kind of blowing everywhere. But yeah, it's very, very warm. So I'm sorry. I do
No,
really.
it's fine. Otherwise, we'll all spontaneously combust at the moment, won't we? We're
Mhm.
talking about your daughter. She seems unfazed by it, or she's like, yeah, whatever. Life's
Yeah,
fine. Find a
yeah.
flat.
At school, they're having like a big sort of like summer beach theme today because they've been studying like Caribbean islands. So
Right.
she's embraced it, to be honest. She's quite happy about it. So
I think I'm going to join in that after this. I'm going to go and find my Caribbean shorts and pretend I'm on some Caribbean island, 17 floors up in Hackney. And are you in Coventry at the moment?
Yes, I am. Yeah, so I'm on campus at the moment in my office. So yeah, it's just me at the moment. But yeah, we've got one of those buildings as well, which I think they must have designed. It's very kind of like Art Deco. So the windows are very kind of slim.
Yeah,
And I think it's supposed to be quite stylishly slim, but therefore doesn't allow very much ventilation. So
right.
yeah, it's nice, but I'd say it's a bit warm.
Great. And how long have you been an academic now? What's your career?
Wow. So I'm trying to think really. So I moved to Coventry University in 2013. So I've been here sort of lecturing kind of like on and off since then. Sorry, no, 2013, 2014.
Yeah.
I was at Warwick sort of before then. I sort of did my undergraduate, did my PhD. So for a little while, so it's been kind of, yeah, over 10 years now, I suppose.
Is that always
And
what you wanted to do as a kid? You were like,
I think so. So I come from a family of teachers,
right.
and I think I always tend to find this when you have an individual who comes from a family of teachers. There's just something in us we just absolutely have to continue to espouse knowledge. Like I
Yeah.
don't know what it is, and I just think that I didn't necessarily want to teach slightly younger children, even
Oh,
though I have worked and taught sort of like at primary, secondary, and college kind of level. So I wanted something that was probably, yeah, a little bit more autonomous, which I suppose kind of university teaching is to a certain extent. You can kind of set your own agenda. You're not kind of part of like the national curriculum, those kind of things. Obviously, we have things like BPS guidelines, but within that, we can be quite creative in our how we, put our materials together, those kind of things. And I think something that I once said to an ex-partner actually, and he took it completely the wrong way, was I said, I just want to be a student forever. And he took that at the time when we were quite young as me never wanting to get a job. And what I actually meant was that I really felt that academia was kind of one of the truest pursuits that you could follow in life because we are here to learn. Well, we're here to do many things, but one of the things that makes us like uniquely human is that, we want to learn.
absolutely. I mean, I think there is a theory about why our particular version of human beings, there were like 12 different types of humans to choose from at one point. One like a hobbit, apparently. I would have liked to have been a hobbit, personally.
Yeah. There's lots of it's something that I I don't know loads about, but I covered it in my undergrad.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's all sorts of theories about how certain kind of like species of humans are still sort of kind of interwoven on a genetic basis, kind
Yeah.
of in the general population, those kind of things.
But
But yeah,
there is, from social psychology, I think I'm right in saying you're known better. But one of the reasons why we're so successful is social knowledge, the social brain sharing of information. So you could have Einstein in another species of human, but it wouldn't matter very much because they didn't share knowledge in the same way, whereas we share knowledge. And it's that sharing of knowledge that makes us pretty special, right?
yes, yeah. So kind of Homo sapiens are known for that kind of social, and also again it's knowledge seeking, it was creation of things like tools, it was sharing of information. We know that the most intelligent species are those who are the most socially cooperative.
Yeah.
So you see that throughout the animal kingdom as well. So yeah, absolutely, we are naturally born to kind of to socially communicate and interact and stuff. So
And it's also like in early development, you'll know this very well, but the theories of the social brain, the brain actually doesn't develop without social interaction. And we can see that in some of those tragic cases of severely neglected babies, their brains literally don't form
mhm.
because there isn't that social interaction with another human to help develop those structures through myelination. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. There's loads and loads of case studies. So it goes right back through kind of like history. So there's a case study, and I never can quite remember exactly which noble person this was, but basically they had this idea that they could basically bypass this need for language. And we're talking sort of like medieval times. I'm going to have to sort of research this afterwards because it's something that I've kind of heard of, but never actually kind of like
Hmm.
looked into in too much detail. But essentially, he took babies and he basically, it's going to sound awful, isn't it? Kind of locked them away, sort of like Princess in the Castle kind of like style, and was absolutely determined that if they just had handmaids go in and kind of sort of like just tend to their kind of biological needs, but not socially interact with them, that they would still develop in the same way. Obviously, they didn't, and they
No, there would have been
died and
absolutely.
they passed away. And yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you wouldn't literally, I mean, we now know, like anybody, you've been pregnant, anybody's pregnant, when the midwife is looking at thriving, thriving is based upon social interaction. So
Mhm. Yeah.
children die if you don't give them social interaction. I mean, some survive, but actually, it's really a struggle. Like the whole organism struggles without that. And I would say, and I think this is true of adult psychology as well. And we know, for example, with older people, loneliness is killing them because of the
Mhm.
lack of social isolation, the social interaction,
Mhm.
and the lack of that is deadly for humans.
There are some studies that show that if you get a dog in later life, you live longer.
Yeah,
It's not because having a dog makes you live longer, it's because you go out on walks and you tend to do that kind of very sort of like awkward,
absolutely.
oh hi, then they sniff each other and they kind of like, and you exchange a few sort of like polite back and forth, but it's still that kind of reciprocal interaction that yeah, the brain is craving. So yeah, absolutely.
But it's also that diversity of interaction, is it? It's actually very healthy for us to have people who are very dislike us. Not as in I don't like them, but like lots of different types of personalities and backgrounds actually keeps our brain exercising.
It does, yeah. So it's essentially it's all about kind of switching on that sort of attentional focus where suddenly your brain has to think, right, I need to think about the rules in this conversation. I need to
That's right. Yeah,
think about the
that's it.
topics that I'm going to say.
Super,
Am
super.
I going to say something that's interesting to this person? You then start to kind of exercise sort of your theory of mind skills because you're sort of thinking, right, I don't, this is a stranger that's walking their dog. What are they like as a person? Like you sort of start to profile them. It's all those kind of
Tell us about theory of mind for people who don't know.
so theory of mind is
And
essentially
this
being
is neurotypical, not neurodiverse. It's very
yeah,
much, we will get into those complications later, but in a neurotypical mind, theory of mind is.
is the ability to kind of take to understand the perspective, the cognitive perspective of somebody else. So it's when we talk about theory of mind, it's quite extensive because it's not always essentially that kind of like perspective or cognitive kind of perspective. You can also talk about kind of sort of like emotional effects and kind of
Yeah.
other sorts of things, but it's about being able to essentially put yourself in someone else's shoes and understand their perspective, their reality, their likes, their dislikes. It's
And that's not, I mean, that's something that develops in the first few years, doesn't it? You can usually test it about the age of 3, right? There's the
Yes,
classic Dolly test. Why is Dolly crying?
the
Dolly's crying.
Sally Ann
Yeah,
task,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, there's the Three Mountains task. Yeah, there's lots of literature around this, so it really
I
depends
know. I'm
on.
asking you to condense
Oh
40
yeah,
years of
how can I
science into
summarize
3 seconds. Off you go.
I'm trying to think. I think we cover it in about at least 2 to 3 sort of like master's level lectures. We
I'm
try
sure you
and
do.
squish it down. But essentially, yeah, I mean, if depending on who you talk to or what sort of
Sure.
theoretical perspective you take, like Piaget was sort of like the classic kind of study, like the Three Mountains task, where essentially, you have the doll
Peekaboo,
sitting
all
on
those
one
games.
side, and it's
Yeah.
like what can you see, what can the doll see, and there's like depending on where that you're sitting on the table, the mountain perspective looks different. So if you're on one side, you see a big mountain. If you're on the other side, you see three smaller one and a bigger one and another bigger one. And depending on how old the child is, will depend on what they answer. So a younger child will typically, when the experimenter says, "Oh, what can the doll see?" They'll say, see what I can see, basically, which it might be just one big mountain. As children get older, and Piaget says it's more like, Piaget actually said it was a lot later, so sort of like between kind of more like 7, but sort of
Yeah.
like kind of between 5 and 7, but more like kind of 7. That's when they're able to actually say, no, the dog can see a different perspective to me, basically. But there are many, many studies since that have shown that actually we know that children have some sense of theory of mind much younger,
Yeah.
even as young as 18 months
Get
old.
out of here. Really? Wow.
Yeah, so it
I didn't know that.
depends
That's news.
how you measure it, though. So
Yeah.
the Gopnik studies basically used things like preference for taste. So broccoli, it's a famous broccoli and cracker study, and they found that even really young children were able to give an experimenter the flavor, the food that they thought the experimenter liked. So most little kids would just like the crackers, so they'll continue to want to eat the crackers. An experimenter will kind of come in and be like, "Oh, but I really like broccoli. Could you give me the one that I like?" And obviously, much sort of like younger kind of like kids will still just sort of push like the kind of like the crackers, but yeah, slightly older. So maybe more like about 2, but kind of
Yeah.
that sort of age range, depending on the child, they start to actually give the broccoli to the experimenter, even though it's completely against their logic of what they like themselves. So
And we're
yeah,
fundamentally born social, aren't we? So one of the things that we're born with those 5 things: tracking, suckling, rooting, grasping, but smiling, which is a
yes.
purely social activity designed to make the person who's our survival is dependent on like us.
Yes, absolutely. So again, some of the studies that actually show earlier kind of evidence of theory of mind are often orientated on things like emotional sort of theory of mind, or kind of
Yeah.
again understanding things like likes and dislikes, because as you say, it's a very adaptive survival kind of technique to want to be able to keep other people happy and to provide them with things that they want. So it makes sense that if you are talking about theory of mind itself, there's even going to be variation within that, because we're able to better attune to maybe other people's emotional and affective states than we are maybe their perceptual states.
Yeah.
And so like the Piaget's Three Mountains is something that kind of comes online a lot later, because that is very much just a kind of a visual perceptive kind of task, which is probably harder to think about and relies on other sort of mechanisms as well. So yeah.
So this, in terms of adaptive, like what we're talking about there, in one level is about the brain adapting, the mind adapting, neural processes and structures growing. Some are developmental targets, but others may be new. And essentially, we are looking at that, I guess, in this whole sphere of being online, being in the social media world, and still trying to figure out the impacts on the fact that we are very adaptable. Another thing about human culture, about humans, is that we live in culture, we adapt. We don't just transform the world, but we transform ourselves. It's a dynamic process. And that's partly why we're so successful as well, um, partly why we're so destructive. It's like it's
Yes.
that's another conversation. But let's stick with that adaptability, because there's something about this skill we have to be plastic, if you like,
Mhm.
Talk about neuroplasticity, but plastic in the way we are, our personalities. That is up for grabs at the moment, isn't it? In this whole conversation around, well, what's happening in screen time, what's happening on social media, what's happening in the World Wide Web, how is that impacting upon us? So, with that as an introduction, where would you start, do you think, to begin to describe it as a psychologist with a specialism in that and children's development? So,
Mhm.
first of all, bad or good or somewhere in between? What do you think?
Interesting question. I'm just going to return the light on in my office because it kind of
Okay.
went out. I'm so sorry. Another reason why. There we go. Um, I mean, I think we touched on this slightly last time we spoke. So I think it's tricky because when we talk about things like screens and we talk about things like social media and the way in which young people are interacting with them, those things in of themselves are not the same things.
Yeah.
So I think we need to be careful, and this is why the research around it can be a little bit muddy as well,
Yeah.
because there's a big difference between a child spending 30 minutes on a computer to do some homework versus spending, 5 hours scrolling on social media or TikTok or whatever it is. We
And
have,
tell us what that difference is. What's going on from your perspective as an expert in this field?
I think a lot, again, there's so many different levels in which it's probably different. So, um, we know that certain types of screen uses, for example, have bigger impacts on things like emotional regulation, for example. So things like kind of maybe very kind of like small screens where you sort of have to sort of like orientate your attention, your focus a little bit more. But then they can be obviously again depending on what you're doing on that screen. But if you're doing something like scrolling through social media, which in of itself is designed to kind of like hook your attention, if studies have shown that if children or young people are on those kind of devices doing those kind of activities, when that's then taken away, that emotional regulation or dysregulation is much bigger than if they were to maybe be watching 30 minutes of an educational TV show. They're watching number blocks for 30 minutes or something where they're learning about different shapes and sizes and those kind of things. So, on a kind of emotional regulation level, they're very different. Also, the actual benefit that they get from it is very, very different. So, again, I always advise that if you're going to use screens, particularly like in an educational setting, it very much depends what you want to use them for on kind of how much benefit you're going to get out of them. So
Mhm.
screens are not great necessarily, or tech isn't great necessarily for teaching of kind of like of language, audio based kind of like concepts, anything that's kind of like verbal necessarily, because again, we sort of need that sort of reciprocal kind of interaction, really, or we need kind of, we just need it delivered in a more kind of authentic, real time sort of way. But screens are actually quite good for delivering mathematical concepts. So again, because maths is a visual subject, and it's a lot about understanding the difference between one block versus two block versus one operation versus another operation, you can actually teach maths quite successfully, sort of like in a screen-based way, and you see like better, bigger kind of like benefits of doing those kind of things. So I think it depends. There can be cognitive differences, but there can also be social and emotional sort of like differences. When you bring in things like social media as well, that's like a whole that I mean that's just a whole different sort of like kind of ball game, because then you're talking about like the broader kind of like sort of social kind of like impact. You're talking also
We're
about
going to
things
get
like
to that in a
relate.
second. So, if I try and summarize what I've heard you say, and you correct
Mhm.
me if I'm incorrect, is that the literally the format, the context, the type of technology
Yeah.
you're using has different impacts, and they're neither good nor bad. They just are, and it's important to understand them. So, small screens make sense. A small screen is going to grab your attention. As you were talking, I was aware that. I'm looking at my computer screen while I'm talking to you. My small screen is off to one side. I'm aware of where my water is. I can hear the children playing in a school across the road is coming through because I got the window open. But actually, I know that if I was just on my phone, my attention would be much more, I would be shutting down. I would be noticing these other things. So it's a different, I'm like my peripheral is available and all that sort of stuff. So that means that different aspects of my brain functioning or mentalization, however you want to describe it, are being used in different ways, right?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. So there's even early kind of like, well, I won't say early, but there's emerging, because again, this is very hard to test. And this is the problem that we have with this kind of area. There's emerging research that suggests that if you actually play the same content on different types of devices and different types of screens, it can have a very different impact, sort of like on a
That
cognitive and a
makes sense.
psychological level. So yeah, if you were to play a Netflix TV show on a phone screen versus a big TV versus something else, it comes across differently. And again, it's to do with lots of things. It's to do with how much kind of like focus and attention you need. It's also to do with kind of the sort of subconscious connections we have with certain types of screens. So we know, for example, that phone screens are interactive. So by default, our brain is thinking about the fact that we can also interact with that screen. We can touch it, we can move it. You've got that kind of very physical sort of
Yeah.
response to it. You don't necessarily have that to a big screen TV, which you just don't and wouldn't swipe and wouldn't touch and wouldn't kind of like interact with. I think with things like phones as well, I think we're also acutely aware that it's not just playing that one Netflix TV show. If I was to close that, I then have also a lot of access to all the other kind of apps and all the other wonderful kind of like social spheres and spaces and stuff. And there could be text incoming, there could be anything incoming. So it's a very different experience cognitively to be on a phone versus it is to be sort of like watching a TV. And I
Then
think
if we bring books into it, I mean, I started pushing myself to read again every day because I got out of the habit of it. It's just a skill. So I've got back into it and I've got a few books that I'm reading and I have a bit of time every day reading on a page. And I guess that's then a different type of focus in the brain and the body, etc.
Yeah, so there's lots of studies that actually look at the difference between reading on a screen versus reading on paper, and that's quite interesting. So comprehension generally is better on paper than it
It is
is
for
on
me, to be
screens.
honest. Yeah.
Yeah, so
That's just because I'm old and that's the way I was brought up. But
it's no, it's a thing in the literature. It's a thing. So yeah, comprehension is better typically on paper than it is on screens. And again, it's there's many reasons for that. But I think it also you get individual variation within that as well. So there's actually some studies that show that that's not necessarily true for everybody. It's true for most people, but actually when you look at kind of like neurodivergence and
right, right.
things like dyslexia and e-readers can be really good for children with dyslexia actually. So and that's again because I think e-readers are flexible. You can do things like you can change the background, you can change the lighting, you can change the font size, so you can make them more adaptive. But to a certain extent, when you're reading on a screen, again, your attention and your focus is narrowed down. So if you have a person that maybe also has comorbid ADHD, or they also struggle with other things, or reading generally is harder for them, that argument that actually you're narrowing their attention might not be necessarily a bad thing to a certain extent.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I get.
Um, so yeah, so I think
And also they're getting the rewards of dopamine from the blue and all that sort of stuff. So
100% also
motivating and all that. I get that. No, that makes a lot
reinforces
of sense.
attention, so on and so forth. So with all of these cases, we always kind of conclude that, I think you started by asking me, is it good, is it bad? It, there's good and there's bad. I'm definitely not anti-technology, but it's it's a bit of a minefield because not only is the positive and there's negative, but there's also it's very broad in that we could be talking very much about screens or we could be talking about social media. And I actually did a because at Coventry, I think I mentioned this before, like we've got our own sort of like mini kind of podcast. And we actually did speak about kind of social media and sort of like screens. And what we kind of concluded was that and I know we'll get onto this in a moment, but it really, a lot of this comes down to, a lot of the new legislation comes down to what exactly it is that the government was trying to affect by bringing in this ban. If their goal was to kind of reduce screen time, is that beneficial?
Yeah. And it's not going to work anyway, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, or is it that they were trying to ban that kind of social gateway? I
Let's
don't
go
know.
into that. So essentially, if we sum up, what we're talking about is keep it various with your kids. Variety is the spice of life. Same with food. Have a look at the plate. If it's very colourful, lots of different things on it, probably all right.
Mm-hmm. Hopefully, yeah. Well, yes.
Probably okay, probably fine. And the guidelines, I remember when last time you were on, you said the guidelines around not having screen time for under a certain age was not actually what the guidelines are. Don't have unmonitored screen time because it's the social interaction that's important. So if any message is coming across here, it's just annoy your kids and get involved.
Yes, it's the more that you can make it an exercise again in sort of social interaction and communication and a joint shared experience, that it's that joint kind of mental activity where essentially I mean, that's why things like pretend play are so great for building a brain for kids, because it's that kind of shared narrative, that shared kind of mental space. It's developing those theory of mind skills when you're both in that same place.
And the literate imaginative skills are so crucial. Um,
Mhm.
I'm going to go down that. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole with you. It's my favorite topic is play, but
Oh,
we're not
yeah.
going there. I have to stop myself. I'm going to be grown up.
I do that in lectures all the time. I go off
It's
on
like I
like
just immediate like with Piaget, I'm like peekaboo. Yeah, let's play
Mhm.
peekaboo because it's such important. But I'm not going to go there. So, um, this social interaction, and I'm often telling parents, don't be afraid of this stuff. Don't be afraid of the social media stuff. Don't be afraid of get to know what your kids do and get interested in it. Form a relationship, and it's the human relationship which is the thing. So let's come to the social media ban, which hit the news recently, and that to me, it seemed like I know that Keir Starmer would have argued, well, we were doing the research, I wanted to do, he's like that sort of tedious thing he does about like, I need 300 committees before I make a decision. Okay, Keir, that's fine. But then he suddenly seemed to go, right, I'm going for this thing. And it seemed to me purely political in that Jess Phillips left, etc., and people were annoyed with him that he was losing people. But is there a real reason for this ban? What's the impact upon it? Let's talk about social media. User generated content is how I think of it. So, like social media, that's what it is. It allows us to generate content ourselves and share it with other people. It's just a tech platform for that, as opposed to the broader screen usage where people might generate content for us to consume, Netflix or an educational program or a training program, etc. So this user-generated world, which now is banned for under 16s. What's your thinking about that?
So when you're just talking about Keir Starmer, to me, again, just before we sort of get into it, I would call it a bit like a swan song in a way. So it's almost
I
like I
think
think,
so. Okay, right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, I think I think something had to be put there, which was kind of like a big move to sort of like cap off like a legacy, I suppose. But I kind of think that's why it's sort of come out of nowhere a little bit, because it was, they floated the idea after the ban in Australia, but it was kind of like, oh, maybe at some point, and then all of a sudden it kind of got implemented. So I I have to be careful when I think about this, because obviously it's my area, it's something that I'm quite passionate about, but I also am acutely aware that I've got both an academic hat and a parent hat on, and I don't know if they necessarily cross
Let's
communicate.
let's have a conversation with both of them.
Okay,
Okay.
parent cat is absolutely ecstatic. She is so happy because my 7-year-old was already getting to the point where she wants to do TikTok dances. She is
Okay.
asking when she's going to get her first phone, because she's going into year 3 in September, but some of the year 6s still have phones. They don't have them in schools, but they kind of her school is very good on its kind of like phone policy and all those kind of things, not really into that kind of thing. It's still, to be honest, bless it, it's not very technologically advanced. It's a little kind of village school. So but she's still acutely aware, because they tend to mix and mingle across age groups as well, because it's quite a small school. That some of the older kids do have this, so she's really excited about when she's going to get one. When am I going to
He
get
wants
one?
to fit in and be part of the like all
Yeah,
children do, and that's fair enough. Yeah.
and as parents, we were sort of given the kind of hard line of kind of like, well, at least 11 or 12, at least secondary school, that's when we got ours. But in my mind, I was thinking, I still don't want to give her one at 11 or 12, because the phones that we got at 11 or 12 were BT Cellnets and Nokias, which did nothing other than play Snake and text someone if your parent or your carer had given you enough credit to do so on your phone, kind of thing. Whereas for her, there are a whole world of potentially unregulated risk, and that's
And they literally are designed to get the attention of a brain that isn't aware that it's getting the attention of, which is the definition of a child. A child doesn't have enough cognitive resources to be able to go, what am I doing? Can I be mindfully use this thing? It's not. It's too
yes.
much to ask of a child, right?
Our frontal lobe, we know, continues to develop right up until the age of about 25, even 30 sometimes. One of its primary kind of, well, not primary, it's got lots of different functions, but one of its functions is things like risk, reward, managing expectations, like organization, all those kind of things. Phineas Gage, really famous case. I don't know if you've ever spoken about Phineas Gage before. Railroad spike through the middle of the, well, through the frontal lobe, knocked out the frontal lobe, started making very risky decisions, survived. I don't know if your audience have ever heard of Phineas Gage
Go
before. So
Google it. It's a fascinating story.
it's really
I
fascinating. We're
mean, the
talking
pictures of the spike in his brain, and you just think,
how, yeah,
like, I mean, this is like a big bar of metal through the front of his head. Like,
yes, yeah.
extraordinary, right? Yeah.
We're talking way back when, and he was like a railroad worker, wasn't he? And he kind of, I
Yeah.
think it was explosives and a thing, knocked it, it kind of went through. But he survived. But his personality became very childlike. And he started gambling, making risky decisions, being emotionally unregulated. But it was one of our
I mean, he
first.
ended up in prison as well. I mean, it's like a very serious but he was fine in many ways. You know, he survived, but it
But it's
is the case that told us what's going on up here,
with
right?
the frontal lobe, exactly. And kids do not have, and young people do not have a developed frontal lobe, and they don't continue to have a fully developed frontal lobe until they get way into their 20s and 30s. So we know that phones are dangerous, and we know that social media and the internet can be dangerous. But as adults, we have the psychological, that we have the prefrontal skills, if you like, to be able to navigate those things. And children absolutely don't. So yeah, as a parent, I was very, very nervous about how we were going to navigate this because you don't want to ostracize them from friends and from all the different things that their friends are doing because that is super important. You want them to fit in. If they're all doing a certain TikTok dance, you want them to be able to do the TikTok dance. But I just did not know how we were going to negotiate that and sort of say, you can have this, but you can't have that, especially when
Yeah.
the phone in and of itself is also just not really
Especially
designed.
when you're talking to a human that hasn't got the negotiation skills. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the truth. It's just yet another thing. I was just talking to a mate about having to deal with their son's obsession with a particular game
Mhm.
and how everything seems to be colored around when can I play the game. And his sort of sense of like, I want to be better than my dad. I want to negotiate, but sometimes I just want to strangle him, you know, and
Mhm.
it's like, it's yet another thing, isn't it, to add into that sort of complicated parenting landscape, right? And
So
particularly when, and this is the reality, often it looks like when you give kids your screen that they're fine, that they will calm down. And like if you're in a restaurant and they've just lost the plot and you give them the screen, I'm not going to blame anybody for that. I think that's fair enough, really. Context dependent,
yeah,
then it
yeah,
makes
absolutely.
absolute sense because that's what it does, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
But what you're saying is it does that at the expense of the evolving child brain, developing that as a permanent skill in
Mhm.
interaction with others. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I literally had this as a parenting example last night. So I always say that just because I talk about screens, I talk about the impacts and all those kind of things, I am absolutely a very typical parent who will allow, my little girl to have a screen, like not
Yeah.
very often, but and she has it in a kind of controlled way. Like she's got a tablet and she's got like a certain kids profile with certain kind of like sort of restrictions on it. If she does go on things like sort of gaming, it's very much kind of, I'm not sure whether or not I'm allowed to say certain brand names or certain things or not, but there's a
This
big,
is fine. I'm not Ofcon. Do whatever you want, mate.
so Roblox is the
Oh,
apps,
Roblox is a nightmare.
but they love it so
My
much.
stepson used to be like so obsessed. He was like Roblox everything, and I was like,
Yeah, and when she goes on Roblox, we've got it absolutely completely locked down with parental control. So there's
yeah,
no chat, there's no going on games that are, older than her, like sort of like
yeah.
8 target audience, all those kind of things. But when we were out yesterday, we always go swimming and then we go and grab something to eat. And I've forgotten the tablet, and she again typically always has it sort of like after swimming, because again, as a parent, it just makes my life a little bit easier if we can kind of get through the changing room and it was hot and all those kind of things. Like if she's occupied, because otherwise she'd be like, stressed. I forgot it. And she said, "Well, Mummy, could I just play a game on your phone?" And I was like,
Ooh.
I really wanted to say no, but the result of me kind of sort of saying no, that by the end of it, I was just like, you know what? That's fine. Yeah, we'll find a game on the phone and you can play on the phone. And suddenly she was an angel. And it was like it was a different child. Absolutely. And I was just like,
Really, yeah, significant, the
so
behavioral
different.
changes.
So
So,
different.
which is important to understand that it is powerful, but it has to be monitored and managed. And parenting is tough. And so the parent you thinks, thank corporate parent, government, for giving me some rules that I can point to and say, oh no, the police might come around, I might get arrested and all that. Whatever,
Yeah.
whatever. I mean, I get that. Then that makes sense. Put your light back on, mate.
Yeah, sorry.
You got energy saving lights.
We have, yeah. So I sometimes think about attaching something to the roof or to the sensor, like one of those planes that go around on a string or something, just to keep it
It
on.
used to be like I used to have when I was at work in council, we had sensor based lights, and if you were in a meeting, they would just go off. So I used to get up and wave my arms on a regular basis just to keep
Yeah,
them.
yeah.
Um, so that's the parent view. So from
Mhm.
a parental perspective, and that was like the research from Australia said that parents were like, "Thank you, this has made
Yes.
my life easier." Okay, so that makes sense. A less stressed out parent means a happier child ultimately. So that's the truth, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Right, I get that. The academic cat is what's your response? And they don't have to be separate people at all. They can
No,
be informed,
yeah,
and I think they should be informed, to be honest.
that's true. Yeah. So I think, yeah, the academic cat is, I think, dubious or at least skeptic because she questions exactly what the aim of this was.
Yeah.
B, I question the also potential hidden agenda, maybe. And we spoke about this a little bit on our Coventry podcast. I do our Coventry podcast with another academic who I would love to introduce you to actually.
I would love
I'll
to meet them. Yeah, definitely.
name drop him, Alex Baxendale. He's wonderful. But he is a bit of an expert on AI and is very kind of skeptic, doesn't like AI, knows loads about it. And it's not that he doesn't like it, he just is very informed about it and knows the potential risks associated with it, I think. But so if you wanted to do an AI episode, he would be the person
Yeah,
to talk.
just introduce us afterwards. Definitely, absolutely would be.
But he kind of actually approached it from a slightly, so I'll come back sort of like to my general kind of like worries about it, but he actually approached it from a different angle, which I hadn't really thought about before, which is actually what if this is kind of a little bit of a first step in, I suppose, the government having a better handle and a better control over all of us in terms of things like identity?
Okay.
Now, I really hadn't thought about it in that way because I think, again, that the parent in me was just like, oh, this is a great thing. But it is also true that now anybody who wants to go onto social media, of which many people will, more so than maybe like other sites that have kind of been banned, either they'll use things like VPNs, absolutely, or they will just concede that they have to do things like scan their photo ID and become logged somewhere in a digital space, I suppose, to actually use it. And most teenagers will not want to be missing out on it. So therefore they will do the age verification, they will do those kind of things. And I think, yeah, Alex was very much of the opinion that it kind of puts that sort of well, it's getting a little bit 1984, basically. I think that's what he's kind of thinking.
I get that, and I want to talk to him, but I'm a bit skeptical of that view
Me
because,
too. Me
as far
too.
as I'm
Yeah.
concerned, billionaires have got hold of this stuff. So, and they don't have my personal freedom at the core of their
Mm.
business model at all. Elon Musk, freedom. I'm not quite convinced of that argument. But I get the point about digital ID. Uh,
Mhm.
I think digital ID is inevitable because it's helpful.
Yeah, I'm not anti-digital ID
You
at
know what I
all.
mean? And it's like I'm okay with my face being scanned in that way. Like I haven't done it yet, but I want to go through the business lane at the Eurostar because now you just tap your passport in when you book the ticket
Mhm.
on your phone. It's
Yeah,
got your facial features, and you don't need to get your passport out. It's just got a camera,
that's pretty good. Yeah.
and so there's no passport control. It's just like you walk through. I'm like, yeah, I'll live. I'm all right with that. To be honest,
Yeah,
you know what I
I
mean?
am. I am. I completely am as well. Like I know
Yeah,
it's a
yeah, yeah.
conversation, but yeah, I think
I do want to talk to the guy. It'd be interesting to pick his brains. So there's that, like social control, all that sort of stuff, and I understand it. But at the same time, I'm dubious about the people who aren't making that argument about freedom and personal liberty, because I come from a view that unfettered stuff, like civil society, saved us. Prior to civil society, prior to rules, prior to governments, human society was really horrific and horrible, and you died horrifically. And you
mhm,
go, what did the Romans ever give us? Well, the ability to walk from one end of Rome, the Roman map, to the other without molestation. Okay,
yeah,
right? So, like, I'll live with that. It's fine. There might be some restrictions, but and also I do think, and this is broadening conversation out, like things like male violence towards women and children, we do need to get in touch with that. And we do this, I think facial ID technology is probably going to be really revolutionary in that
mm,
area.
exactly. Yeah, I'm pretty happy to be monitored if it means that we live in a, relatively safe sort of society. I'm not doing anything wrong, so I don't think it matters whether my face is kind of out there and stuff. But
Same here, and
yeah,
I don't think governments will ever really well organized. So I don't believe in the conspiracy theory of governments because they're too incompetent to sort this
yeah.
stuff out,
But
right?
see, my dad, bless him, he's in his mid 70s and he still only has like a flip phone. And one of his reasons, I mean, he always jokes that he would still send smoke signals if he had the option, if he mailed. He was like, I don't want them to be able to like, track me or track my.
They're tracking you, mate. Don't matter.
But
As soon
yeah,
as you buy an Apple, they're tracking you. So we've lost that one.
also,
Um,
also, Dad, I don't think they want to track you.
I know, I know. I do. I'll track him if he feels better about it. Um, so thinking about that, so there's that. I get that. The politics, the whole sort of digitization of our identity, digital ID, legitimate concerns about data and data protection and information. Health data in particular is a big issue. I get that. There's It's always a double-edged sword, I think, that stuff. Thinking about user-generated content specifically, um, and how that is used and abused. Any thoughts about that in terms of children and development? And like I'm thinking of things like you've got the pro-ana stuff, pro-anorexic stuff, which is, as far as I can see, horrific. And you've got those suicide sites telling you the best way to do it and all that sort of stuff. The obvious one, child porn, which is horrific and dreadful. We've had the age verification around porn sites in the UK, which has seen a drop of 70% traffic, which is great. I think that's like the porn is a really damaging thing to our kids in terms of sex education, undoubtedly. Um,
Unrealistic expect yeah, there's a lot of research that looks at expectations of things like sort of intimate relationships based on exposure to porn.
yeah, and also there's a lot of violence in porn, male violence, and young boys and young girls thinking that's what sex is. Like,
Hmm.
and it's not, kids. That's not what sex is.
Hmm.
Right? It's a very niche form of fetishized sex, which some people enjoy consensually, and that's fine. I'm not going to sort of like shame fetishization, but if that becomes the norm, that's a bad news. So, in terms of this stuff about user generated, there are specific issues I think around that, and around guardrails, etc. Sorry, just somebody calling me. I thought I was on Do Not Disturb, but there you go. Ever always connected.
Yeah. I
So
know the
let's think
irony.
about the content specifically and all that sort of stuff. Is there research around that, looking at that, and what the impact is on children in particular?
Yeah, so if we're just and again, it comes back to, I suppose, this idea of exactly what it is that the government is trying to ban or trying to reduce, at least for young people. There's a lot of research that has started to look at the difference between what we call sort of like passive social media use
Okay.
and active social media use. And then I've actually had an MSc student quite recently done a study looking at what we call hyperactive social media use. So you would classify passive social media use probably as somebody who literally just consumes. So they scroll, they look through, they probably don't really, well, if it's completely passive, they don't really interact with it very much at all beyond actually maybe spending a certain amount of time viewing a post, and then the algorithm picks up that they like that post and then they give them more of that post. But it's a very much a kind of passive sort of like interaction. You've got active users who are more likely to do things like comment, share, follow a link, maybe get involved with things. So they actually kind of are engaging a bit more in the sort of the social use of social media, if you like. But then you've also got the hyperactive sort of like users who actually will be the ones that are much more interactive. So they might be on it for a lot more significant amount of time, but they also might be basing their kind of their day-to-day behaviors and actual recreational time around interacting with the social media. They will also create content
Yeah.
themselves quite often and contribute to it very much as a kind of social sort of platform. So I think one of the problems that we do have with sort of like this social media ban is, again, I'm not sure that the government has thought enough about these nuances or these differences, because there are differences psychologically on in terms of how people interact with social media. There
Sure.
can be an awful lot of benefit sometimes from actually getting socially involved in social media. You can find like-minded communities, you can find information that you may, not have been had access to where you are currently in time. Marginalized minority groups, for example, one of the biggest complaints that have come out about things like the ban is that, young people who maybe need to be able to find people who are like-minded or who are able to give them information or options about how they feel about certain things, or to find those like-minded communities, are now potentially going to struggle because they cannot connect with people. So those that use it on a more social level, and it kind of comes back to this idea of, if we are social, that is good. Even if we are social digitally, it's still good as long as it's, nice socialization, no, not cyberbullying, those kind of things. Then that's a beneficial thing still for a brain. What is not beneficial for a brain is sitting and passively consuming hours and hours and hours of content, which
Because
in
that's just
itself,
numbing out and social, that's emotional regulation. Really, we want to emotionally regulate with another person.
and we want to be getting involved, thinking, making decisions,
Right.
thinking about, again,
Okay.
it's still involving theory of mind when you write that post that everyone else is going to see. I mean,
Okay. Yeah, because you're
it,
imagining the audience and what they're thinking and
you could argue that it even takes broader sort of theory. I don't know if anyone's actually looked at this, but kind of almost broader theory of mind skills, because you're having to think about, well, I don't know how, again, it would probably depend on individual users, but that whole way in which it's going to be perceived by the internet. It's
there's
not
about there's about a million Jungian therapists now ready to call and say, we know all about this. I'm like, oh, leave me alone. So no. And then the hyperactive, the content generator. Now, I
yeah,
think a lot of news and a lot of noise happened around that because like one of the sells for social media is you can make a living out of it. And I get that. I really understand that. And old people like me don't understand these business models and the way the world of work is changing. And work is tough for young people. So it does seem unfair, maybe, to take away a potential income source. Any thoughts about that, really? Your
yeah,
field, I mean, I know, but
it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because I mean, we're talking about 16 and above, and classically speaking, 16 and above was always working age when I was younger. I remember getting let go from a grocery shop because they thought I was 16, but I was actually 13, and I was trying to find part-time work. And I think I worked about 3 shifts before they realized that I wasn't old enough to work there. Really, it's kind of 16
so
and
that's
above.
holding an appropriate social boundary anyway.
Yeah, in a
That's
way it did.
economic activity, right? I get that. Yeah.
I think, I mean, there's always been roles that children can do to earn a bit of pocket money, things like paper rounds and kind of like, babysitting and all those kind of things, where they probably do it slightly younger. But whether or not children who are younger than 16 should be making a living on social media, I think, again, of itself is really questionable. So we had this discussion, and again, I had this discussion as a parent.
Yeah.
Again, my little girl really likes to watch, and this is another thing you've just reminded me, the lack of consistency on what they've applied this ban to as well is also problematic, because
Right.
they've essentially banned things like TikTok, social media. They've also banned YouTube. They've not banned YouTube Kids, which I just think is just, I assume it's because it's not interactive in the same way, maybe, that open YouTube is. But
More passive consumption. Yeah, absolutely.
the amount of content that you get on YouTube Kids, which is damaging socially, emotionally, cognitively, is awful, and it started to creep onto things like Netflix and Prime. So one of the things that my little girl likes to watch, and again, I probably have got to be careful that I'm sort of not name dropping certain shows in particular, but there are quite a few different shows where it's a young individual, and there's both young girls and there's also young boys, and it's normally them and a parent, and it's kind of the day in the life of this child. So
Yeah.
such and such goes out, they're a gymnast, and they go and they follow this young person, and they're a gymnast, and that young person is now a social media star. Everyone knows them. And some of these have now got their own shows on Netflix, and they've got them on Prime and those kind of things. And certainly my little girl is absolutely obsessed, but they are bordering on becoming inappropriate at times. So they'll do things like such and such has their first kiss, such and such has got a crush, such and such goes on a date. And there's been a lot of rhetoric around, a lot of people quite rightly kind of talking about the fact that actually the wrong audiences are also getting attracted to these sorts of things. So
Sure.
I suppose if you have got someone who's under 16 and they are making this kind of content, that is also dangerous for other reasons as well, because you're then putting them out there at a time when, again, they're not necessarily socially or emotionally ready to navigate the world of being A, very famous, and B, making money in that kind of
I'm going
way.
to put you on the spot here and get your academic brain to come up with an answer.
Hmm.
And good or bad on the whole? All of aspects of you, your mum, etc., all of that. On the whole, good or bad?
On the whole, oh gosh, I'm
I
an
know
academic
I'm a
and you're
horrible
asking me to
person.
go
You'll
one
never
side or
come
the
back and see me
other.
again, I know, and quite rightly so. This is
There is an
impossible for your
answer
brain, I know.
to this. I'm just going to go with my very kind of sort of like primal gut instincts, because we know that studies say that that is normally right. I think good, and I'm very happy. But I don't know whether or not I would have had the same answer if I wasn't a parent myself.
Yeah.
I am extremely happy that, yeah, my little girl's
But
not.
you've got appropriate skin in the game, and I think that's reasonable. It's
Mhm,
reasonable for us to go with this. A parent is telling me that their best interest gut decision about their own child is it's a good idea.
mhm. Yeah,
I think we have to listen to that, right?
I think so. Um, and I just think that really we need to think a little bit more about what exactly it is, or the government and powers that be need to think a little bit more about what it is exactly that they were trying to ban. Because
Okay.
if it is that kind of very sort of passive scrolling engagement, then they need to really think about actually targeting the way that it's coming through in other platforms
Yeah.
like Netflix, Prime, all those kind of places. Again, my little girl can't turn on those kind of platforms anymore without seeing these TV shows. And we've sort of said, okay, but you can't watch those ones because they're a bit, we don't really like the sort of messages they're conveying. And actually, if it was that, because again, it has a negative impact on language development, socialization, all those kind of things, unrealistic ideals, whatever it is, then they need to do more. If it's that they just didn't want sort of young people socially kind of interacting with kind of social media platforms and being exposed to the risks of connecting with people and those kind of things, then I think they've maybe not again they've sort of missed the point,
Yeah.
because socialization isn't necessarily a bad thing. And again, certainly when me and Alex were talking about this, there are other platforms that this has always been done on. Back in our day, back in my day, and I'm, only just about 40, it was MSN Messenger, it was
Exactly.
MySpace.
And new forms of platforms will emerge.
Mm-hmm.
So, I
But it
mean,
was
we
always
do
that.
need to come to the end. I mean,
Sorry.
it is a complicated thing and it's an
Mm-hmm.
interesting thing. And like in terms of the type of like Facebook approach to things, I mean, you've got some great projects out there, like Together All, which is specifically a project which is similar to that, but it's monitored. You know what Together All is. It's a great tool for people with mood disorders. It's 24/7. You log on and it's like a social media platform which allows you to manage your mood much more effective. And the clinical outcomes are great. So yes, it is complicated, but I'm going to go with Mum says this is a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to have
Yeah.
to leave it there because Mum's
Okay.
always right as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll never argue with Mum. I learned that at a very early age. I was going to become a cropper if I did that. So, okay, it's super to have you on. Thank you. Please do, if you get a moment, introduce me to your colleagues who might come on and talk about other aspects of these things. It's a fascinating part of our culture at the moment, and it's going to continue to be more and more interesting. And I'm love the fact that people like you are doing the research that we need to understand it, so that we can have informed conversations about it. I hope you all enjoyed that, folks. I certainly did. And be lovely to hear your comments. Be one of those active consumers of this.
Yeah.
Get
Yeah.
active. Use your theory of mind and tell me what you think. I'd love to hear from you. But we're going to say goodbye for now. And I wish you a great day, Kat. Enjoy your day.
Thank you.